Hello and welcome to what probably is the last episode of the week. You never know, maybe I'll drop more. My name is Pete Dominic. This is Stand Up. Joining me today, comedians Noel, Casler, and Jay Black go over the day 3 of the hearings. We went live on Twitter and recapped during the first recess and at the end of the second part. I'm going to share that with you. And I've got the great Ron Insana, who is a very respected finance reporter, author, former hedge fund manager, and speaker. And I talk about inflation and energy and so much more with Ron. Really good conversation with him as always. Thank you to everybody who joined me for the Thursday night hangout. I went to bed early and got up early to make the donuts here, so gonna get this up for you. I think you're gonna really like the conversations I'm having on today's episode, and thank you so much for all of the feedback on this week's episode. It's great to hear from everybody at the Hangout about what they like and who they'd like to hear next week. Let me know who you want to hear on the show. As always, send your ideas over to standupwithpete@gmail.com. But let's get right to it, shall we? Yesterday, the House Select Committee investigating the Capitol insurrection detailed how former President Donald Trump tried to pressure his vice president to join his scheme, his crime, to overturn the presidential election. And also how Mike Pence's refusal to put his life in danger as rioters called for his hanging on January 6, 2021. 2 witnesses testified at Thursday's hearing who advised Pence that he did not have the authority to subvert the election. Former Pence attorney Greg Jacob and retired Republican Judge J. Michael Ludwig. Now, I don't know if Judge Ludwig had a stroke or not, or why he spoke so haltingly, but we did make some jokes about that. So I feel bad if there was an issue and not if there wasn't. Also, he's a Federalist guy, and so I don't know. I don't feel that bad. The committee also walked through how conservative, crazy, conspiracist Trump attorney and Indiana Jones impersonator John Eastman put forward a legal theory that Mike Pence could unilaterally block certification of the election. A theory it was roundly rejected by Trump's White House attorneys, Pence's team, but nevertheless embraced, of course, by the former president. Some of the takeaways: Trump was told Eastman's plan was illegal, but he tried it anyway. The panel tied the Mike Pence pressure campaign to January 6th violence. The danger to Mike Pence was real as the mob got about 40 feet from the vice president. John Eastman wouldn't take no for an answer on overturning the election. John Eastman emailed Giuliani about receiving a presidential pardon after January 6th. But the star of Thursday's hearing was not in the room, and that was Mike Pence. Does he deserve credit or not? A lot of people arguing about that on Twitter. And, of course, the big takeaway is that, well, American democracy is on the line. Just a few takeaways from yesterday's day 3 of the hearings. But now let's get to our analysis and jokes with comedians Noel, Casler, and Jay Black. If you're not following these guys on Twitter, do it now. You can see Joel August 3rd in Cape Cod, by the way, at the Music Room. He's also got a bunch of other dates. Check out NoelCasler.com. Noel, of course, has 25 years of experience working behind the scenes in live television, music industry, including working directly with the Trump family for 6 seasons on Celebrity Apprentice. So it makes him a very valuable source and hilarious and brilliant guy. And I love Noel. And, of course, Jay Black is a writer and comedian who I've known for a really long time. Great guy, and you're going to see a lot more of both these guys individually and together right here on the show. We might do some dates together. Jay is on Twitter at JBlackIsFunny. JBlackIsFunny on Twitter. Go follow him there. He is so good there, and thanks again to Rob Dog for suggesting we have these guys together again. 2 times this week. They're becoming contributors to the show, and I'm very, very happy to have them. So this first segment is right at the recess of the first part, and then I'll come back and tell you when the second segment starts.
10 minutes.
All right. Well, now we are live.
Hey, guys. How are you?
Are we live?
We're live on Twitter.
Nice.
All right.
You should see my Twitter if you want to share it. That's what you get roped into doing.
That's what I'm doing right now.
I see. There I am.
Hell yeah.
All right, everybody. Here we are. There's Jay Black. There's Noel Casler. They were such a hit last time. I thought, well, what are we going to be doing? We're going to be watching this. You guys are going to be live tweeting it. Both of you hilarious. And we should talk about it. So let's get started. This is, by the way, a different kind of analysis and punditry that you're going to see anywhere else. frankly.
In the sense that it's good.
In the sense that it's good, and that we have Noel who can connect so many different things. For example, Jay, how about this? Noel, earlier today, Trump demanded equal time. He went on his whatever the bullshit. I don't say the name. His fake Twitter, his other Twitter account, whatever. And he said, I demand fair time that I should be able to get. My question to you is, why is Trump not shown up and knocking on the door and standing in front of the cameras and demanding that they look at him?
That's a good question, because he knows he's guilty, right? Everybody in the world is up there saying he's guilty, but it's all about attention and feeding the base and distracting, and if you saw that picture of him last night, he doesn't want equal time at this moment. He needs a freaking dialysis machine or something. Dude's looking pretty gnarly.
At one point today, you made a comment. It seems like you don't go very many days without referring to the fact that Donald Trump has a problem pooping his pants. Will you just... Now, this is the type of analysis you won't see anywhere else. Just real quickly, Noel, prove that to everybody here. You say a lot of... You defame the former president.
Hey, it's the truth, man. If it's the truth, it's not defamation. He's incontinent from a lifetime of fast food and stimulant abuse. And this is a known fact. Your viewers can look it up and find their own photographs. Constitutional Mischief is his middle name. And somebody asked me on Twitter, if there was an employee assigned to it. It's Keith Schiller. Keith's nickname on The Apprentice was Wet Wipes, because Keith is the guy who would take him off set and clean him up when he would evacuate his bowels in the fake boardroom. Truth hurts. It's real. And I'm not making fun of people for being incontinent. A lot of times I'll get attacked by incontinent Twitter. I'll probably be wearing adult diapers someday.
Right.
But a guy who pretends to be this masculine, fit guy who looks like Rambo is an overweight, bloated drug addict who we're now hearing tried to take our country into the constitutional abyss for his own self-interest. And that's shameful.
Jay,
I like to think there's so much BS in him, it just comes out both ends indiscriminately. That's my view on it.
It just leaks out.
Yeah.
Well, listen, speaking of ageism, I have really displayed quite a bit myself today. First against Andrea Mitchell. Then I lashed out at Benny Thompson being old and doddering.
Right.
And then, of course, Judge Ludwig, who the world met today, apparently gets paid by the word. And I at one point I had to take a call, so I was delayed. So I got to double speed him. And nothing changed. Nothing changed at all. Jay, what do you think of Ludwig and his performance?
So there's the Palmer report tweeted out that he's got a speaking disorder. If that's the case, I don't know. I Googled it. I couldn't find anything that said anything about it. My son has a speech disorder. So let me say, if that's the case, I apologize for all the angry tweeting. That said, the J6 committee has done such a good job of orchestrating these events to clearly lay out what was being said, what was being done to everybody. I don't understand why that he was put on today to talk. You could have recorded that. You could have done what YouTubers do, just chop it up, jump cut. People don't mind jump cuts. It was, I think, a misstep because, even if you're very interested in these things, which we all are, it was a real hard time to sort of follow him from the beginning of the sentence to the end of the sentence. And what I said was, it took so long. By the time he started his statement, Herschel Walker had fathered 11 more children. From the start to the end of his opening statement.
Noel, you at one point thought that Judge Ludwig might have actually been buffering. Do you want to retract your...
Yeah, it's either buffering or the edibles kicked in right before he sat down. Obviously they brought him in because he was the mentor of both Ted Cruz and John Eastman, Dr. Eastman, as he's being called and referred to today. So they're bringing him in because he's a Federalist Society judge who is a staunch conservative his whole career. And he's saying that, this is beyond the pale, even for somebody like him. But I agree. I mean, this is a performance, right? This is about getting the public's attention and making a point. And the guy, it was painful. I was holding my breath. It was like being at an open mic or something where you're just cheering for the guy to get through his bit.
That's a great analogy. Yeah.
And I'm with you. If he has a speech impediment, more power to him. But he's a judge. He's a public speaker. You know what I mean? Like, that's his job, is to speak. And I used to co-host the Stuttering John podcast with John Melendez. Like, I have no problem with people overcoming adversity, but Twitter's so quick to attack you. It's just like, come on, man. We're comedians making light of a pressure-filled situation that absolutely has nothing really funny about it, and we're trying to let off steam. And that guy was a tough choice to open the show, man.
I don't get it. Yeah, I used to teach English, and it reminds me of that one kid whose turn it is to read out loud, and everybody in the class just looks desperately at the teacher like, no, please. No, it's bad enough we're doing the Scarlet Letter. Do we have to hear him read the Scarlet Letter? Can we just move on? Like, it had that whole feeling.
Speaking of pathetic, someone is going to tell me when they come back live, guys. I'm sure it's going to be a couple minutes, maybe 1-2 more minutes. But we heard today that apparently Mike Pence said to his lawyer or his chief of staff that when he goes to heaven, he wants to immediately thank the framers for doing a really good job, except for one part of it. But of course, many people reacted to that thinking, wow, that's presumptuous that Mike Pence thinks he's going to heaven, Noel.
Yeah, these guys all think they're going to heavens, and Zac Efron will be there, greeting him dressed as a Ken doll. You know what I'm saying? It's a big presumption, and everyone, let me just say, everyone's calling Pence a hero, and Liz Cheney basically did a campaign commercial for Pence at the top of this hearing. Pence isn't there today, and the January 6th Commission didn't formally invite him, as far as I know. So, let's hold back on the Superman in a cape kind of comments. He did the bare minimum.
Also, Noel, real quick before I go back to Jay, what is it like when the Pence family and the Trump family and the kids, they get together? I can't think of two. Other than them both being white, they're so different, really. Yeah. Come on. Yeah. What happened?
No, it's an odd mixture. I don't know. That's beyond my purview. It happened after, but I can't imagine them all sitting together with Mother and Trump, and it's insane. It's insane.
No, Jay,
I have it on good authority that they once served Mike Pence 1% milk instead of skim milk, and he left the table in anger. I've heard that story.
I can see that. Yeah. Also, Zac Efron was walking around the White House and he wanted to go meet him. But what do you? All right. Well, let me just ask the final question, maybe that I'll have time for, and hopefully you guys. I don't know if you guys are going to keep watching and you want to come back. I'll be here. Trump said to Mike Pence, if you don't go in that building and steal everything and then burn the building down, I'm not going to be your friend anymore. The threat that he said, I'm not going to be your friend anymore. Noel, help us understand the psychology of a grown man threatening another man. If he doesn't go commit a crime, I won't be friends with you.
I'll tell you exactly what that is. Trump comes from a mob background. Trump was in business with the mob. That's a mob threat. That's saying, if you don't do what I say, you don't have the family's protection anymore. And I can't protect you if my mob, so to speak, wants to hang you the very next day, which is exactly what happened. So that was an implicit threat. And I'm sure Mark Short and Pence took it to be such. That's how Trump speaks. It's a mob boss talk. Yeah, I can't be your friend anymore if you don't do this. Good luck showing up at Atlantic City trying to get a contract. No offense, Jay. I know you're from that.
No, it's 100%.
Well, Jay, you have something to say. You've levied this kind of threat throughout your life to people, including your own son. You threatened not to be friends with. Yeah,
my son came in and he said that his yearbook came in, and I told him he couldn't get a yearbook. I said, we're not friends anymore.
Yeah, that seems...
he can't have Lunchables. I think it's fun. The image of the Godfather in a diaper is very funny to me. Tom Hagen changing him. But yeah, it was the thing about Trump is, I think you're 100% right, Noel, that it was an implicit threat. I also think there is probably on some level, you're not my friend anymore, the same way a 6-year-old would say it.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I think it's the combination. That's what makes him so lovable to the MAGA base. The gross Queens criminal mixed with the overly sensitive adult child, sort of, the chocolate and peanut butter of MAGA.
100%. And that earlier thing with Bill Barr, we learned in the last hearing where he said, you don't like Trump. You don't love Trump as much as they do, as he refers to himself in this third person product that's just a feel good doll for fascism, and he's shocked that not everybody is on board because he believes his own bullshit. Sorry for cursing, but
I thought you were going to apologize for using the word fascism, but that is a word that pretty much everybody is using across the board. Even conservative constitutional scholars are saying that's exactly what this is. And how jarring was it to see, I think at the beginning of the hearing, which took place 43 hours ago in Luddig time, and I'm going to hell, and I'm going to see Mike Pence there with the framers. But the montage of people threatening Mike Pence, that was pretty powerful, and I guess I hadn't quite seen it. How did that sit with you guys? I mean, they timed it as soon as, Trump said the night before, I'm not going to be, I hope they showed that a couple times, him standing in front of the dumb helicopter. I hope, Mike Pence does the right thing. And in real time, people found out that Mike Pence, quote, sold them out. And you saw what happened, guys.
Yeah, it reminded me of Scent of a Woman. They're trying to get Chris O'Donnell's character to sell out and name names, and he won't do it. Just this idea of, it felt like a high school move of a whole, but like the pressure. The thing about Trump is it's never a complicated scenario. You always see right on the surface exactly what he's doing. He was trying to pressure him, and everybody around Trump was trying to pressure him, and the implicit threat was there from every single facet of this.
Absolutely. And the fact that they had so much ire and bile built up for Mike Pence, right? You're a conservative, and that's the guy you're really worried about. You could see if it was like AOC or somebody who'd been a symbol of liberalism, but you're talking about a guy who has American flag underoos. You know what I mean? Who will never, ever waver from Christian, white, fascist sort of ideology. He's as Indiana as it gets. And instantly they were ready to hang the man. That should sober and scare many Americans, because that's not going away with Trump. That is going to be recapitulated into DeSantis and whoever the next level of this fascism is. So I think there's a lot of telling kind of stuff in there that should be quite concerning.
Are you guys, they are back. Are you guys going to watch the next 14 hours? I'll be here, and I'd love to have you both come back and recap that. We'll share this on the podcast tomorrow as well. And just one correction, they are not American flag underoos. Well, they are, but the stars are replaced with crucifix. That's the only thing.
As God intended.
They're easier to get wood in those.
All right, we'll be back, folks. All right, there you go, Jay Black and Noel Casler after or at the first recess during the hearing. We were live on Twitter. I'm not sure if I mentioned that, so it was pretty cool and a fun experiment. But then we did it again. We recapped the second part of the day 3 of the hearing, and let's play that now with comedians Noel Casler and Jay Black. You can watch this on Twitter at any of our Twitter feeds, by the way, if you want to see it.
You had to remain seated until the Capitol Police have escorted members from the room.
Extorted.
Without objection, the committee is...
Okay. Oh, yeah, we're live. Jay Black, Noel Casler, watching the January 6th hearings with me, just wrapping up the second segment. And guys, let's just be serious for a second and just ask you just to get it's hard to watch these. And I think, Jay, you tweeted something about this. Every time we see this be recapped, it's hard to imagine that the Capitol was invaded. And we can never give enough attention just to what happened. And we saw, again, what played out and seeing it all linked together. What's your overall reaction that this happened and that we're having this very important investigation?
Well, I think there's a good reason why Trump and his cronies continually say it was just political discourse or it was just tourists. I think that they know more than anybody else that there's no American even if you're soaked in the cult juice of Donald Trump, that's got to be a disturbing sight. You don't want to think about it. You want to block it out. We all sort of watched it live, and I think we have a kind of PTSD about it, that we kind of want to believe it wasn't as bad as it was, right? So I think that the J6 committee continually reminding us what this is about is a good move, because it's disturbing every single time. To see that MAGA sewage just ooze through our Capitol. It wasn't political discourse. It wasn't kind. It wasn't a tour. It was gross, awful monster people trying to disassemble a constitutional democracy, and it was gross.
Noel, you wrote pouring gasoline on the fire is Trump's MO. He had weaponized the MAGA mob, and he knew it. He was putting Pence in his crosshairs via tweets. I mean, they laid it out there pretty good, and he didn't even, at one point, I feel like the most dramatic part of that testimony was they asked Pence's lawyer, who apparently was always with him, which is interesting. He's in there in the garage, and he says, did the president ever call to see about the Pence family safety? And the guy's like, nope. Never called. Yeah. And how did the Pences feel about that? They were frustrated that he didn't call and ask if they were okay, Noel.
Yeah, and that's the point we were making right before the break, right? But right before the second part of the hearing is that when he said, hey, if you're not going to do this for me, I can't be your friend anymore. That's what he meant. That's what the mob boss was doing. He was putting out a hit on Pence with those tweets, in my opinion, right? Yeah. He was putting them squarely in the crosshairs of an angry mob, that, as Jay said, were so soaked in cult juice that they thought they were warriors for freedom and they were ready to hang the guy. And like you're both saying, this is insane. And this is why it's so important to have these hearings and publicly air this stuff, because time is not on our side. The horrors become diluted. A year and a half later, they're able to campaign off of this stuff. Right? Let's face it. Most of the GOP candidates running right now are running on a big lie platform because they're able to sanitize it to their, suburban base and mix in the racism and the, gas prices and all this other. No, these were monsters that attacked our Capitol. This was like as disgusting as it gets. It was a personal affront to every American, and we all need to be reminded of that.
Who else time is not on their side is Judge Ludwig. I am not a good person, and someday I'll be old and I'll have problems. But they went back to him right there at the end. We weren't expecting that. But do you think Judge Ludwig landed any more punches? At one point, he actually, between words, I made a sandwich. But do you think he made any other good point? Like, was it effective? His points?
I honestly think he'll be effective in transcript and soundbite. Which I'm not making a joke here. I do think the fact that he is a Federalist judge and that he carries weight in maybe not MAGA world, but in like legitimate Republican world, to see him so definitively say, like, not, hey, this was kind of bad, I don't know, guys, but to come out and say that, Donald Trump and his supporters are a clear and present threat to democracy. I think if you're reading this later, it's going to be impactful. In the moment, when they said, here's a few more words from Judge Ludwig, I think it would have been funny to have video of all three of us going like, no, please just get to the end. But yeah, I think it will be impactful in transcript.
Noel actually grew a beard and shaved it during Ludwig's final comments there. What else do we learn other than that everybody apparently in that White House, they pray like 5 times a day. Are they Christians? Are they Muslims? I can't even figure out. A lot of religion we heard. And I thought it was interesting because it came from the Democrats. I think it's Aguilar, whose name is really hard to pronounce if you're Andrea Mitchell. But anyway, like it seemed like they were playing into that, Noel, like the religious, audience.
Unbelievable. Daniel Sixth, was he a cabinet member? I didn't know this name, John, we're supposed to have a separation of church and state. So I honestly get a little uncomfortable when that stuff comes up. Everybody's got the right to religion, but I was reading my Bible in the basement. Like, what? Like you're one of the guys between like fascism, and making democracy go through, and you got time for Sunday school. It makes me a little nervous, but and to your earlier point, I do believe what Jay said and Pete, you said. I think that Judge's testimony was for the law students down the road. I think in a transcript, it's going to play well. I think in reality, it was like that was an encore nobody asked for. Like that was like, let's hear Freebird again. You can drive a truck through those pauses.
No, and our ad libs I recorded, so maybe I'll keep them in there. But you tweeted, let's talk about this guy, John Eastman, who I think, Jay, you said you were impressed that he broke out his Indiana Jones costume for the January 6th rally. Is that right?
Yeah, the thrown together at the last minute Indiana Jones costume, like where you go like, oh my God, we have a costume party. What can I do? And you look and you go, well, I got this trench coat kind of and this dumb hat. Let me put it on. I'll just tell everybody I'm Indiana Jones.
Basically, let me just recap it. The Pence's lawyer, who's being told by Eastman, they agree. They have a long talk about con law and everything. And he says, listen, you agree that the Supreme Court would throw this out 9-0. And Eastman's like, well, maybe it'd be 7-2. And he's like, it'd probably be 9-0. And then Eastman apparently was like, yeah, it probably would be 9-0. Okay, good night. The next day, Eastman comes back like, yeah, listen, you go ahead and tell Pence he's got to give it back to the states or not certify the election. And Pence's lawyer, that was his name, Jacob, he's like, what happened? Yesterday you said it'd be 9-0. What happened overnight? And what happened is Trump told Eastman, they must have been talking a lot. You go make sure this gets done. And Eastman knew it couldn't be done. He never believed it. Noel, you're right. I love how casually these treason weasels like John Eastman plead the fifth. When the law they've tried to molest in service of their fascist aims fails, it's still there to protect them and their bow tie protectors as long as they can afford retainers. So well said, Noel. John Eastman, he's a real kind, smart guy.
Right. And a guy was at Kirkland Ellis or something, University of Chicago Law School. These are top legal eagles in this country. These guys were making enormous salaries to do this. And it shows you what an old boys club the law is and justice is in this country, that they could do every way to subvert it, throw every cockamamie theory. And then when it doesn't work, I plead the fifth. It was the smugness and casualness that he pled the fifth in that deposition, sitting with his lawyer who was now making the money. It's not fair, right? It's just not a fair world. And I think that's why justice is so hard to come by, because that's an institution. DC runs on lobbyists, law firms, and lawmakers. That's the bread and butter. It's an industry town. And something like this shakes the foundation of that. And you have to wonder how many dudes in McLean are really going to want to keep pushing this issue.
Yeah, really, all good points. And also, he apparently requested a pardon like the day after, a couple days after, or was it the day after the 6th? And he said something like, I've decided I need a pardon if you're still giving them out, Jay. Both of you, the reaction to the pardon thing? I think that might be one of the biggest headlines to come out of this. I don't know that we knew that.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me like if you're with your wife and she's like, well, okay, how about sex? And then you try to escalate it. And however you would escalate it, Pete, I'm sure something gross. And she goes, well, no, we're not doing that. And she gets angry. And then you say, well, is the sex still on the table? Because I will take that if it's still on the table. It came across in that same kind of like, well, I have overstepped. Is it possible that the pardon is still on the table? By the way,
my wife in that situation says I plead the fifth, which is really a real turnoff.
Well, you shouldn't bring your lawyer to bed so often, Pete.
Not a bad point.
But the fact that he, when Donald Trump said you don't plead the fifth unless you're guilty, which I don't necessarily believe, but when you couple the 100 pleadings of the fifth with the asking for a pardon, how could anybody who's watching that not come to the conclusion that at least some shady stuff was going on? I mean, even if you're MAGA, you got to say, well, wait, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Well said. And can I just give you a reach around point on that? While we're soaked in the cult juice, let's go back to Jared's clip, which they showed again today, where Jared smugly said, hey, I was too busy working on pardons. One of those pardons he was working on was for his father, Charles Kushner, who is every bit a scumbag as Donald Trump was, right? And he got that pardon on December 24th, I believe. So, they were covering their own asses before this even all fell apart. And so why wouldn't Eastman ask for a pardon the next day? And I'm no legal expert, but he very well may have a pardon. Some of these pocket pardons, apparently we don't know unless they're fully charged,
Right.
I mean, and the other point was made, I think, to Eastman in that clip during that deposition. It's like you'll go on whatever news channel and say whatever, but you won't talk to us. I mean, that kind of thing, I feel like, I don't know if there's any precedent for that with liberals or in American history where you would go and spout something on a TV show, but then you wouldn't testify. Remember Hillary Clinton testified for like 11 hours in Benghazi?
Right.
I mean, she wasn't going on TV in the meantime. But I just thought that was an interesting point. Navarro has been in the same situation. Many of this, they'll go on with their friendly or even unfriendly people, but it's not legally binding. So when they go up in front of the legally binding panel and have to give a deposition, they just plead the fifth, the cowardice.
And that's so galling to me because they're treating the fundamentals of American democracy like a game. Mm-hmm. That it's just fun. I'm going on TV. They're professional wrestlers going up and giving their rabble-rousing talk on whatever cable channel that they're going to. But when it gets real, when it actually comes down to brass tacks and what we're trying to achieve as a country, they go, oh, no, I'm sorry, I can't. They're treating it like a game, and I find that especially galling.
Noel, I'll let you guys go after this, but Noel, wasn't it Trump who was always critical of anybody who pleaded the fifth and said, if you plead the fifth, I forget. And then I think his sons pleaded the fifth, and he's going to have to will he plead the fifth? I mean, your thoughts on Trump and his relationship with the Fifth Amendment and his kids, too.
Oh, they'll definitely plead the fifth. And you're correct. Eric Trump pleaded the fifth recently in his deposition with Attorney General Letitia James.
I think he pleaded this many.
I want this one.
This many.
Yeah.
I want this one. Yes.
His nickname was Twizzlers on Celebrity Apprentice because he would steal all the red Twizzlers off the craft service table.
That explains it. All the dye went to his soft brain.
Exactly. But yeah, they're going to plead the fifth. And like Jay just said, and you said as well, Pete, it's maddening. There's a golden parachute for all of these guys, right? Like we said the other day when we did this, it was an honor system. Democracy was an honor system, and Trump was somebody so corrupt that he knew that, and he has the backing of Rupert Murdoch now. So you do all this malfeasance, and you get an appearance fee on Fox News. Larry Kudlow went right from the disaster we're watching to his own show again on Fox Business. Like the next day, he didn't skip a paycheck, and that's dangerous. That's dangerous for democracy, and that's why you can't have this amount of money in politics.
Oh, all great points. Guys, I'm getting nothing but kind words. People are loving that we're doing this. I really appreciate you doing it with me again. And special thanks on behalf of Jay Black and I, Noel, to your followers for following us. It's been a huge windfall for us. I'm not sure what you got from it, Noel, but we certainly do appreciate you being here with us and all of your amazing followers and supporters.
Thank you. Shout out to the followers. They're a good bunch of people.
This is fun to do.
I have one final statement I'd like to read.
Go ahead, Jay.
No, I'm only joking. I was doing my Ludwig impression. I need another 45 minutes to talk.
I don't know when the next one is, but we'll try to do it together again. I really appreciate you guys, and have a great weekend if we don't talk to you. And follow Noel and Jay if you aren't already, but I think you probably are. Thank you guys very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Peace.
Okay, there you go. Noel Casler and Jay Black again. And I hope you appreciated that. Watch us live or watch us on Twitter if you want. And hopefully we'll be able to do it during the next hearing as well. We will see. We will see. No promises, but I thought that was great. And hopefully you did as well. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much for listening to that. And now you're going to learn a lot from my friend Ron Insana, contributor to CNBC, host of the Market Scoreboard Report. He brings unique coverage to all things financial, to Insana's Insights. Check out his podcast. That's what it is. He provides a daily look at the latest events in the economy and business world. Also let you know what he's reading, what he's watching for that day. So check him out on Facebook, on Twitter at @RInsana. I love Ron. I love talking to him. I find that he is an excellent communicator, really smart guy, and I think that you're going to like my conversation with him about all the relevant issues regarding what's happening in the economy. All right, let's do it right now with the great Ron Insana.
Thunder. It was great last night, or 2 nights ago.
Did you wake up to a bomb in New Jersey the way I did here?
Mm-mm. What do you mean?
Lightning.
Oh, you mean one of those bomb?
No. Thunder. I heard the loudest thunder. I keep doing a stupid thing where I say, "Did you hear that lightning?" I feel like such a yeah.
So, when my first 13 years of life were in Buffalo, and we had those kinds of storms, which were I've never seen until last night. I've really never seen anything scarier than the thunderstorms we used to get in Buffalo, where the sky would go pitch black and you'd get raindrops that were, golf ball size.
It's interesting you say that because, I grew up in Syracuse, and I know that you're like like 50 years older than me. But
somewhere around there, yeah.
I think the climate was probably pretty similar. And I just sometimes wonder, I'm sure there's data for this, if everything isn't more extreme. Like I noticed like the wind, granted I live in Rockland County, north of the city, it's a different place. And like I said, like the thunder is just louder. It was what I heard this morning, I've never heard in my life. We all thought it was a bomb.
I would say that Buffalo, while it's been more extreme of late, when I was there as a kid, and quite frankly, we didn't care much. You know, there would be an occasional tornado warning or watch. And my mom would come to the front door. We'd be outside playing, and she'd go, "Kids, come in." I'm like, "What's the matter? Why?" She'd, "Just come in." And we go through this like 4, 5, 6 times. You know, like, no, we don't want to. Then we get in the house, we find out why. It's like, there's a tornado warning. It's like, Mom, we live in Buffalo, not Kansas. You know, it's a warning. We get these things every summer. You know, don't worry about it. And we'd get stuck in the house for a while. But when the storms did come, they were serious.
Yeah. I mean, Buffalo is be some crazy weather that there in that lake. And how about you mentioned Buffalo, so let me just go ahead and ask you, get real serious. How did you react when you heard about the shooting? You know, I'm sure you're familiar with the Black community in Buffalo.
Absolutely. Listen, I know the street quite well. I know the area quite well. I grew up in the suburbs of Buffalo, had of course, a radically different experience than the folks who live on Jefferson or who live on the east side of Buffalo, which is, although they call it a predominantly Black community, I say it's an all Black community because for the most part, Buffalo, and I was looking at the stats recently, is still the 6th most segregated city in the United States, as it was when I lived there in the 60s and early. And
I bet you Syracuse is up there too. I've heard that about my hometown over and over. I mean, these are, 2 cities 3 hours apart. What is it about New York State?
Look, so Syracuse and Buffalo, I mean, when you talk about New York State and everybody thinks Manhattan, I mean, they could not be any farther apart.
Yeah.
I think philosophically, politically than it might as well be Los Angeles, because Buffalo is much, much more like the Midwest. And as you know, our accents growing up, we sounded like we were from Chicago, not like we were from Brooklyn. So different place, blue collar, conservative town. In my whole life, it was a segregated community. I grew up in an all white neighborhood, went to a virtually all white school through junior high before we moved to Los Angeles. And look, it's still, when I go back, I still hear things I don't want to hear. Didn't want to hear them in the 60s. Certainly don't want to hear them now. Yeah. But there are people who still say things that you...
I think my understanding, I should know this, but it's definitely how they built those cities. Like in Syracuse, I know, 81, Interstate 81 divided was a segregation line, and they kind of were built to have the white half and the black half, and people stuck just mostly to those parts for years.
Oh, absolutely. So what we called the expressway, which was 33, cuts right down the middle of Buffalo and divides it racially. And when you would get on Jefferson, if we'd be coming home from a relative's house who lived closer to downtown Buffalo, we would have to drive down Jefferson, which in the Black community. And that was, at the time, there was always a concern among white people about driving through a Black neighborhood, which I find at this stage of my life to be abhorrent. I've been on that side of town many times since I've gone back, and it's not dangerous. They're good people who live on that side of town who, as you say, structurally have been in many ways forced to remain there. And so, it was by design, not by accident in many cases.
May you be so lucky to be invited to a Black home in Buffalo or Syracuse for a party, a barbecue.
And vice versa, quite frankly. I mean, and not be so lucky, but for that to have happened in my lifetime. Yeah. In there.
Yeah. No mix. Yeah, for sure. I hear you. All right. Well, we could talk about the racial divides of upstate New York forever, but there's a bunch of things I specifically want to talk to you about. What's going on in the economy and the financial world. And I remember one of the first times we talked, at least for the podcast, we talked about oil. You've written a lot about energy markets for years. And what do you think of both the politics and the economic issue around the price of oil and President Biden, who was very critical of Saudi leadership, MBS, on the campaign trail, and now he's got to go kiss his ass because if you don't get these oil prices down, you don't get gas prices down, I definitely lose the election, I lose the House, and it seems very politically driven, and that's real politics. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yes, across the board. I mean, so in a certain sense, at this point, the enemy of my enemy is my friend when it comes to Saudi Arabia, because of the war in Ukraine and the disruption to Russian oil supplies around the world and the sanctions that we've put on Russia, we're short oil. Now, we are increasing our production domestically, but not fast enough to catch up with demand, not fast enough to make up for lost supply. So who do we go to? We go to the country that has long been, except for a very brief period in the last several years, the swing producer of OPEC, which is Saudi Arabia. And as abhorrent as that regime may be to many people, myself included, the president's stuck. It's realpolitik. I mean, you've got to go out now. And hopefully not on bended knee, because it is still a regime that I think many of us find, unpalatable. But at the end of the day, you still have to negotiate with them. And if you want prices at the pump to come down, and if you want people to see a break, the only way we're going to do that is with more supply of oil.
How much of the responsibility is it of the multinational oil companies? I know a bunch of CEOs, I think they got dragged up in front of Capitol Hill and were criticized. And I've heard some what I thought was decent analysis that they don't need to be charging as much as they are. But what are your thoughts?
Well, there's some strange things that have happened. So when we peaked the last time with respect to oil price, $147 a barrel in October of 2008, we were talking, and maybe you remember this, Pete, maybe you don't. There was a lot of discussion about peak oil theory at the time, that the world was very quickly running out of fossil fuels and that $200 was in sight and that we're going to see a massive drawdown of crude oil supplies globally. Well, then the fracking revolution began, and all of a sudden the United States moved into the pole position by 2020, producing the most oil on the planet, over 12 million barrels a day, almost 13 million, and everything kind of turned on its head. So what's different now in this peak at $117 or $120 a barrel, we've added no refining capacity. So it's very difficult to take whatever oil we do have and get it where we need to go. We have exported more oil to Latin America because we get better prices in other markets. We have higher shipping costs, higher refining costs. And so on the one hand, yes, there's probably some selective gouging going on. And certainly, this, although I oppose it violently, the notion of a windfall profits tax has hit Congress and the White House. Didn't work the last time we tried it in the 70s and early 80s. Look, the reality is there's a constrained supply of oil. We haven't built a refinery since 1975 in the United States, so we haven't added the capacity to make gasoline. This is a supply and demand problem, and we have serious supply constraints around the world, and not that much spare capacity, I might add. OPEC maybe, or Saudi Arabia more specifically, could only add like 200,000 or 300,000 barrels a day versus what we actually need is a couple million.
So in an ideal situation, I mean, what if Biden, if there's nothing to be gotten, what does he ask for?
Well, look, I mean, I guess to a certain extent, they can make up some of the shortfall if they pump a little more. And look, the president's also been encouraging U.S. producers to pump more. There are 9,000 unfilled, federally approved drilling permits. Now, there are other problems in the oil patch. Number one is a lot of folks are looking at their future in the oil business and saying, if we're going to go green, I'm not making a major capital investment where we're going to shift our reliance from gasoline to electricity. Maybe I could produce a lot of natural gas. That would be a net plus. But the price of oil 5 years from now could be $40, and suddenly I've sunk billions of dollars into the ground and I can't make a profit. So they're returning money to shareholders instead of drilling. So we are seeing our production go up. There's no doubt about it. We're going to cross 12 million barrels a day again next year, but not at the pace that we need to offset all these different disruptions going on in the world today.
The reason why there hasn't been a refinery built, is my understanding, is because nobody wants a refinery in there.
NIMBY.
Yeah.
Not in my backyard.
Sure.
Absolutely.
It's not a fun thing to have. It's easy to organize your community against. Say no to the refinery. Okay.
Yeah. Listen, we also said no to liquefied natural gas terminals, which, for the amount of excess natural gas that we have, that would help the U.S. Both from a energy policy perspective and a foreign policy perspective. If we were able to export more and more and more of that to countries like Japan and others that truly need it, including now Germany, since it's weaning itself off Russian oil and gas, it would put us in a better position economically, a better position geopolitically. And again, even getting those terminals sited, licensed, and built has been a near impossibility.
Are terminals just storage facilities for natural gas?
And a transmission point, so where you can load onto a ship and you put LNG into a tanker and send it overseas.
Why do you hate the planet so much that you love these. Whose worldview, like who do you read? I know that you are an environmentalist and you're also an expert on energy. When you look at all these extreme weather that we're seeing right now in our country as we head into summer, fires everywhere, drought, and everything else, you know all about the science, you know all about this. I mean, what do you see in terms of the future when you talk about oil? You know, you don't want to invest in future oil or future legacy fossil fuels because they're not a good investment. But is renewable energy a sound investment if government's not incentivizing it, if there aren't regulations that, you know, push us towards it? I mean, how do you see all that, Ron?
Well, look, I mean, government incentives have assisted every business, every technological revolution that we've had in the history of our country. So for people who, you know, they always talk about industrial policy, picking winners and losers. We've done that for the entire history of the country when it comes to specific technologies, right? I mean, you know, Tesla gets huge subsidies, and anybody who engages in electric car manufacturing gets subsidies. If you put solar panels on your roof, the state that you live in might give you a housing, you know, subsidy towards your house, the cost of redoing your roof. Look, I think at the end of the day, on the energy side, I read Dan Yergin a lot, who I think is brilliant with respect to analyzing energy policy. On the other side, you know, where I'm starting to fall in line is backing nuclear power. And I know that's to many people a radical solution, given what happened in 3 Mile Island, given what happened in Chernobyl, given what happened in Fukushima in Japan. You know, it always sounds like an end of the world proposal to put nuclear power plants online. But France has done it quite successfully. But renewables actually work. If you look at the output in California that comes from renewables, it's extraordinarily high. And so I think, and President Obama was right with his all of the above strategy. We did get bailed out with a surge in oil production. And so the cost of energy came down rather dramatically. Natural gas is the transitional fuel that we need to get to the other side. So people are going to have to put up with fossil fuels for 5 or 10 more years. I know it's hard. Obviously, there are climate issues taking place that militate against that point of view. But you also need China and India to adhere to the Paris Accord conditions if you really want to deal with climate change, because they're bigger polluters in many ways than we are.
Yeah, what you need is a miracle. You need a miracle. You need a miracle source of energy to pop out of the sky. You need aliens to bring some clean, renewable energy, or whatever that thing was in the Batman movie where the almost blew. Well, you need something.
We need St. Anthony, and you know about that as well as I do.
Well, he ain't coming. So in lieu of that, let me ask you about cryptocurrency. WTF, Ron? When do I get to?
I know. I think we've spoken about this before, and you know that I think crypto's bullshit, right? So I mean, let's just be plain about it. I think it's nonsense, and I think some of these people are nuts. Now, having said that, look, the underlying blockchain technology that goes along with it, I think is transformative. It's going to help the financial sector. It's going to help a wide variety of industries make their transaction-based businesses more efficient, less costly. By the same token, and pardon the pun, I don't think we need currencies of anything other than the dollar, euro, yen, or whatever else is floating around the world right now as a sovereign. You look at what's happened to El Salvador, which adopted Bitcoin.
Yes, I saw you tweeting about that.
Currency, and they're getting killed on it. You know, so look, this is in my mind, and I would agree with Bill Gates here, both when it comes to crypto and even things like NFT, which my son is trading successfully NFTs, but it's greater fool theory stuff. You know, the notion that somebody's going to buy a picture of a bored ape or an invisible friend for much more money than you paid for it. Now, my son and his best friend had that experience. They got whitelisted, which is how you get into the so-called NFT, trading community. And they bought an invisible friend for $1,200 between them and sold it for close to $30,000.
Wow.
Yeah. So my 20-year-old music producer son's getting involved with his best friend who's a comp sci major at Northeastern, and they're playing around in this area. And as I like to say, I had an invisible friend growing up, but I was never able to monetize it quite like that, you know?
I just had a soccer ball pillow that I would have sex with. Anyway.
Okay. We can talk about that offline, I would imagine.
Well, yeah, fine. It's my invisible friend, but it made me feel safe. So that's fascinating. I really want to learn more about NFT. That doesn't sound, I don't know, it sounds somewhat, I know smart people that I trust that are investing in it, put it that way. And then
I understand the market for digital art. And at some point there are going to be people who do what other famous and well-regarded artists do in that space. Some of the stuff is quite frankly, it's nonsense or crap. I mean, if you go through OpenSea, which is a site where you can see a lot of NFT transactions, there's a lot of garbage on there. And so it takes a pretty discerning eye to understand, what has the sponsorship, what might be attractive, what might be truly scarce and rare, that where you can make money, or more importantly, in the long run, hold on to something that could be unique down the road. The same you would with trading cards, with real art, with, signed jerseys, right? All the type of memorabilia that you might want to own or trade.
Let me ask you about the I word. You could speak for hours about the history of inflation in the United States of America, but I guess my top line question is the kind of, partisan political one, which is, this isn't Joe Biden's fault. Of course he's going to get blamed for it. Incumbents are always going to get blamed for it. But the answer to this, similar to, I think, the financial crisis in 2008 to some extent, is you can figure out what the root causes are if something's infected all the countries in the world. So it's not a U.S. thing. So it's not a Biden thing. Am I threading the needle at all?
So there's a great book, and I didn't mean to overlap on words, but there's a book called The Great Wave by David Hackett Fisher, which is an analysis of inflationary trends in the world since the year 1000. And he goes back and looks at grain prices in England, for instance, and other countries going back literally, quite a long time. Inflation and deflationary waves are generally global in nature. They're very rarely, except in case, if you look at Turkey, or you look at, Latin America, or, some African countries that have experienced, enormous hyperinflation. Generally speaking, these waves that we've experienced are global in nature. And look, in my mind, and I've been arguing with academics for quite some time about this is a supply side, not a demand side problem. We normalized demand with all the assistance that was doled out during the pandemic. But then you add to that the shutdowns in China, you add to that the Ukraine war. And so we have nothing coming from China, or less than normal. We have, food supplies and energy supplies that are being curtailed in terms of the export capabilities of both Ukraine and Russia going to the rest of the world. People don't even realize that combined, Russia and Ukraine account for 30% of all the grain exports in the world. So when you have global markets like energy and food, prices go up. And in my mind, this is a result of those things: the pandemic, the shutdown in China, and the war. So yes, demand normalized against really constrained supplies. You try and get a car quicker than 2 months because you can't get the computer chips to make the cars. I was talking to my dealer, and let me clarify, my car dealer, not my other dealer, that, he's talking about, he had 3 AMGs on the Mercedes lot in my neighborhood for $100,000. He had a customer come in who wanted to buy one, except none of them had electric seats. So they had hand cranked seats in a $100,000 car, and the lady walked out on them. So we're lacking supply of so much stuff that, and the demand is normal. Of course prices go up. That's just what happens.
Well, what do you make of the Federal Reserve? You're not a critic of the system. You're not a gold guy or some kind of weirdo.
But, no, I'm not a weirdo.
No, when it comes to monetary policy, you're I guess a meat and potatoes kind of guy.
Well, yeah, look, I mean, I think I don't, I don't live in the conspiracy theory world, the Jekyll Island conspiracy about how the Federal Reserve was created and it was done to screw everybody out of their money. That's just nonsense. We had a decentralized financial system in the country up until 1913 that worked horribly, right? Before we had a relatively stable dollar and what have you. So look, the Fed, people are criticizing the Fed for being late to recognize inflation. If you go back to the middle of 2021, we thought we were entering an endemic stage of the pandemic and that things would normalize very quickly. We didn't think China would shut down when we hit the 5th variant of COVID. We didn't know in the middle of 2021 that Russia was going to invade Ukraine. So this extended the life cycle of inflationary pressures beyond anybody's reasonable expectations, including the Fed. There's no way they could have said, all right, we need to start raising rates in the middle of 2021 because Russia's going in. That's just nonsense. And Larry Summers is making that argument. My friend Jason Furman is making that argument. I think it's complete, utter bullshit. And I think it's a demand side problem. Now, the Fed's raising rates so much that we have a big downside day again in the stock market. And we're switching our worry from inflation to the worry that the Fed's going to do so much, even though it's what we're asking for, we being the market and others, that they're going to do so much that they're going to drive us into a recession, which, by the way, is a feature, not a bug of current policy.
A feature, not a bug of current policy, current fiscal policy?
Monetary policy, interest rate policy from the Fed.
So what do you make of those predictions of recession that they're coming from everybody from Jamie Dimon to all kinds of different economists?
So Jamie's got the hurricane. Our friend Elon Musk has the super bad feeling about the economy.
Right.
Whether or not that was a haze-induced moment for him is hard to tell. Look, the economy is certainly slowing. We're seeing it in all the data. Retail sales last month were down. Housing starts were down 14%. The housing market's getting crushed right now under the weight of mortgage rates that have doubled in the space of a year from 3 to 6%. Fascinating statistic. So if you purchased a $450,000 house last year with a 3% mortgage, the house that you could afford today at 6% is $320,000 to get the same payment. A better than 30% haircut in price for the same monthly payment. So it's the rate increases are already having an impact on economic activity, and certainly on market activity, which will have the slight negative wealth effect that could make things a little bit worse. But then we're seeing crypto implode. We're starting to see some European sovereign debt problems emerge. Japan's struggling to support its yen. And so when you have these asynchronous policies among central banks around the world, and I don't mean to get in the weeds here, but something typically breaks and then the Fed will stop. So the best we can hope for is that something happens that forces the Fed to stop and then reverse course potentially and start the cycle all over. That may not happen this time because they really have a different philosophy about beating inflation so we don't re-experience the 70s.
Oh, man, it's such great analysis and really interesting and scary, too, of course. But
I'm not forever scared. That's kind of how I look at this stuff. It's just what we're going through now,
Yeah, there's so many unpredictable things that I think the pandemic certainly created, but the pandemic itself, too. One last question just about housing. Somebody sent me this, and I've heard this, and I've talked with Ritholtz and others, I think, about this. But how seriously or how much of an issue is kind of the private equity investors in the real estate market that is making it harder for normal, hardworking folks to afford houses and artificially inflating the prices of those houses?
Yeah, it's, I've been trying to do some research on that to get a hard number on how much supply is being held back, because in the wake of the great financial crisis, a lot of large private equity firms went out and bought all these houses and condominiums at massive discounts. If you went to Miami in 2009, you were paying 35 cents on the dollar. If you went to Henderson, Nevada, you could buy tracts of homes at 25 cents on the dollar. So they did that and converted them to rentals, right? So they're off the market as far as for sale signs are concerned. So we have, again, in addition to the notion that we didn't also build more housing as we typically would after the great financial crisis, which was housing related and centered, you had this large group of investors come in and take supply off the market. We're short roughly 6 million homes relative to current demand. What percentage of that is in private equity hands? We don't know. The millennials who delayed family formation first because of the great financial crisis and then because of the pandemic account for about half the new home buyers out there right now. So we're trying to get family formation going again among the 70 plus million millennials, and it's being constrained by a lack of available housing.
Well, you can live in your parents' McMansion.
Well, that's been going on since 2009, right? And the parents are getting a little tired of it because the kids are turning 30. It's like, get out already. It's like we want to downsize. We'd like to go someplace warm.
I envy those. I envy those parents who can live peacefully and joyfully with their 30-year-old children. I seriously think if you can make that work and you're happy somehow, that's great. In some cases. I
mean, look, I love having my kids around. So my oldest is 24. She just rented, I think she and her boyfriend just rented an apartment in Manhattan, which is some ungodly price.
Yeah.
My middle child, who's 20 and a music producer, lives with us like half the year and then travels the other half. And then my little one's about to be a sophomore in college. There's no more fun than when they're here. Now, could we live with them again in the same manner that we did, into their 30s? I don't know. It gets tougher as you get older, and everybody, all of a sudden they're not that they ever were, but when they were under your control and you could lay out the plan for the day or the week or the month, You can't do that anymore. So it gets, you have 5 different lifestyles, cohabitating potentially, and that becomes a little more complex. But no, I love having my kids around. It's a blast.
You're a great family man, and they've all done really well, it sounds like. And I wonder how Manhattan, she's moving in with her boyfriend in Manhattan, and they got, I always think about Manhattan apartments. I had many. And the space, the way that you would think about using space is radical.
If you don't live here, you don't know, right? When I was 29, I rented an apartment in Los Angeles in Woodland Hills in the San Fernando Valley. And at the time I'd gotten a big raise. I'd been promoted at Financial News Network. And I think it was a $900 a month apartment, but it was a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, upstairs, downstairs, 2-car garage, washer dryer in the place. It had 3 pools, a putting green, an on-site laundry, right? My daughter's moving into an apartment that I believe is $4,800 and 11 square feet in 1 bedroom. And I'm like, honey, you could get a house in New Jersey for that. And quite frankly, you could probably buy a house if you wanted to. Well,
my dad, you're such a dad. My dad said the exact same thing when I moved to Manhattan. You know what you could get in Syracuse? You know what I said to my dad? Same thing she's going to say to you. Yeah, but I'd have to be in Syracuse, Dad.
But listen, Hoboken's probably a little cheaper. And you can take the pass in. And just go straight to work from there.
Maybe a little cheaper.
Just a little. I know it's gotten really expensive there.
Something about living in New York City. Both my daughters want to live in Manhattan, at least for a short period of time, and paying out your ass and to live in a tiny little space. And it teaches you all kinds of different things. So a lot of stuff.
And hopefully they'll learn those lessons because at some juncture, I hate to say it this way, but for double that price on rent, you can get a 5,000 square foot house in New Jersey with a basement that you can turn into anything you want. You know what I mean? And so it's kind of insane. She sent me the lease. They needed to have 40 times their monthly income in combined annual salary. Yeah. I was like, when you buy a house, you only need to have to 1/3 of the value of the house to qualify for the loan. That's some crazy shit.
That's for a 1-year rental lease?
Yeah.
Wow. So, that just goes to show you that, no one, granted, okay, it's Manhattan.
Yes.
But there are a lot of issues with people finding affordable rentals all across the country. So
Miami is hot, and also some of the migration patterns we've seen have really boosted both home prices and rental costs in Nashville, in Austin, in Spokane, in San Diego, these places that everybody kind of wants to go to. Everybody, a lot of young people still want to live in Manhattan, the increasingly large size of the rats notwithstanding. They still want to be there and, kind of just tool around and take advantage of the scene. But yeah, there are a ton of places that have gotten hot all of a sudden, but they've also now gone up in price.
Well, you say there are a ton of places gotten hot and finishing where we started. I say the future is in upstate New York, from Buffalo all the way, over the next 30 to 50 years, maybe after we're gone.
The Arctic Circle.
Well, yeah.
So my bet is if you bought land in northern Canada, if you were able to, which is very hard to do, by the way, as a U.S. citizen, but if you were able to do it, it'd probably be one of the best buys you could make.
Well, I got a buddy, as a listener, Kevin Richburg. He's planting an orchard now. So that these trees that normally are more acclimated to North Carolina's climate, they will eventually in upstate New York. It'll be perfect, and he's gambling that he'll time it right as a result of climate. So adaptation. Yeah,
about farming arable land moving considerably north of where it is today.
That's what you're saying about Canada, right?
I'm sorry. Yeah, absolutely. So southern Canada will be like the Midwest. Or northern Minnesota or whatever,
Yeah, it'll be an interesting future. Ron, so great to talk to you every single time. I appreciate you making time.
Sorry, I was so casual. I thought,
Well, I may or may not post the video based on the fact that you look exactly like Jason Alexander in his early Seinfeld days.
That's been true for my wife and I went to across the street from the old FNN or CNBC building. There was a grocery store, and Jason Alexander was on the cover of TV Guide. And my wife, probably then girlfriend, we were checking out in line and buying some lunch. She goes, "Honey, look, you made it."
Did you ever? Alexander. Have you been mistaken for him?
Him, Danny DeVito, Burt Young. You pick one of them.
Yeah, combine them all, and you turn out to be a solid 10.
Exactly.
Ron, thank you so much, man. Awesome as always.
Always a pleasure, man.
There you go, Ron Insana, everybody. Insana on Twitter, roninsana.com to learn more. Check out his podcast, Insana Insights. Always great to talk with Ron and get his perspective on things, and really, really appreciate him joining me on the Friday show. And that's all I've got for you. Thank you to Noel Casler and Jay Black. Please go let them know that you heard them here and appreciate them, as well as Ron Insana. And on Twitter, it always makes a huge difference when you thank my guests. And that's all I've got for you. Thank you so much for your support this week, your overwhelming support every day. Please sign up for a paid subscription if you haven't already. You can always pay more if you'd like. Go to patreon.com/PeteDominic and have an awesome weekend. Be the change that you want to see. Reach out to me. If you're a stand-up community member, you're never alone on the Discord platform, which I heard was raging last night after our hangout. So check us out there, and thank you guys very much. Be the change you want to see in the world. Learn to meditate. I've been meditating again lately. It's been really good, and that's all I've got for you. Okay, John Carroll, take us away, buddy.
To let in some light, you gotta stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense, and you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town, just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.